The Massachusetts Department of Transportation may choose to retain and distribute the video, still images, audio, and/or chat transcript. By continuing attendance with this virtual public meeting, you are consenting to participate in a recorded event. If you are not comfortable being recorded, please turn off your camera, keep your microphone muted, and refrain from chatting in the transcript box. Else you may choose to excuse yourself from the meeting. If you prefer to excuse yourself, you can find the materials at www.mass.gov/CIP. Please note that you are automatically muted upon entering this meeting. This meeting will be open to questions and answers at the end of the formal presentation. Next slide, please. A few Zoom controls here. The microphone button is to control microphones and speakers. The camera button is to turn the camera on and off. The little chat box is to ask a question and share comments via private chat to the host. Note, all chat comments will be a part of the official record. Raise your hand to request to be unmuted for verbal comments, and the glow button is to select the interpretation language. The closed captions button is to turn on closed captions automatically generated by Zoom. To adjust caption size, click the upward arrow next to the start video, stop video, and then click video setting and accessibility. Move the slider to adjust the caption size. If you cannot access the internet or you have technical problems, please call into the meeting at 1-888-788-099, meeting ID 892-4730-4438, passcode 605065. When sharing questions and comments, please 1, state your name first. 2, share only one comment or question at a time, limited to 2 minutes to allow others to participate. There are 3 ways to indicate you would like to ask a question or share a comment. Use the raise hand button to request to be unmuted for verbal comments. Click the chat box to submit written comments or questions to the host using the chat panel. And *9 to ask a question via phone. When it's your turn, the moderator will call out to the last 4 digits of your phone number and unmute your audio. Next slide, please. Now, before we get started here, I just wanted to introduce Matt Genova from the Boston MPO. He will be saying a few words here about all the things the MPO does and some of the other details of their STIP plan. So take it away, Matt.
Great. Thank you, Patrick, and good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here and for having us as co-host today from the Boston Region MPO. So again, my name is Matt Genova. I manage the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, for the Boston Region MPO. Joining me on the call today from MPO staff is Kate White, who manages our public outreach program. Since the CIP meeting is all about the Boston region, I'll say a few quick words about the MPO's role in allocating federal dollars to transportation projects and how that relates to the CIP process. The Boston Region MPO is a board of elected representatives that approves the allocation of all federal transportation dollars in the Boston region. All projects funded by federal dollars in the region are listed in a rolling 5-year TIP. So we are one of 13 bodies across Massachusetts that develops a regional TIP. All 13 regional TIPs are combined at the end of the fiscal year to make up the State Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP. The investments laid out in the STIP then become one part of the Capital Investment Plan, or CIP, which, as you probably know, or as you're here to find out, is the state's plan for transportation funding that includes both federal and state sources. And that's what we're obviously here to discuss today. So Michelle Ho from MassDOT is going to go over this again in a minute, but it never hurts to mention some of these elements, the relationship between the TIP, the STIP, and the CIP, as we know that the alphabet soup here can get a little bit confusing. So most of the projects receiving federal funds in the CIP are selected based on MassDOT and MBTA goals and then presented to the MPO board for their approval. So these agency-led prioritization processes are essential to ensure that each agency's needs and goals are being met. The Boston Region MPO board also allocates about $110 million a year of its own federal funding to projects that the board selects based on criteria supporting their goals for the regional transportation system. The MPO typically likes to focus most of these funds on helping municipalities fund projects that would otherwise be too large for local funding alone. The MPO funding process happens annually, just like the CIP, but is winding down for this year, with the board expected to endorse the final federal program for the region coming up later this week on Thursday, June 3rd. However, there are still plenty of chances to get involved with MPO work in the near term, and I'll cover a couple of those now. So recently, the MPO has dealt with significant levels of project cost escalation. This is no stranger to many folks in the transportation world. So the MPO has formed a committee to discuss changing policy to better address this issue. And those committee meetings are set to start actually also later this week on Thursday, June 3rd, right after the MPO full board meeting. These meetings are also open to the public, just like all MPO meetings. So you're more than welcome to join and listen in on that conversation and provide your comments if that's a topic that you'd like to learn more about. In addition, the Boston MPO has begun hosting 2 pilot working programs, which might be of interest to you in the region. First, we have what we're calling our Transit Working Group, which is an MPO hosted forum for coordinating among transit providers in the Boston region, including regional transit authorities, transportation management associations, municipalities, and state transportation agencies. This forum is also intended to support the representation of transit needs more fully in MPO decision-making. MPO is also in its pilot year of what we call our Community Connections program, through which 14 projects are funded in the TIP so far. This funding program is intended to support first and last mile solutions, so things like bike share, transit signal priority, and local or regional shuttle service. So it's also a relatively new program for the MPO, and we look forward to sort of continuing to roll out that program. But if you're interested in any of those sorts of projects, be certain to follow that conversation as it evolves. And finally, the MPO also offers some technical assistance to municipalities here in the region and conducts transportation-related studies. So if you have a topic you would like to propose, we are always all ears for those, so feel free to let us know. I know that's a lot of information, sort of a crash course on everything Boston Region MPO. But if you're interested in anything that I've just touched on, you can always reach out to myself or Kate White, again, our public outreach coordinator. And we're both happy to be a resource however we can be. You can also learn more about everything that I just talked about and all the MPO's work more broadly at bostonmpo.org. So with that, I'll leave it there and turn it back over to Patrick and Michelle to go over the details of this year's CIP. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Matt. Now I'd like to introduce Michelle Hull from the Office of Transportation Planning, who will bring us through the rest of the presentation.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Matt, I want to say thank you so much. This is great. We're going to touch on the CIP and the STIP alignment in a couple of slides when we get into that part of the presentation, but I think you gave a great overview of our partnership with the Boston MPO and how critical the projects are that we fund with our federal aid dollars get into the capital plan. As Pat mentioned, my name is Michelle Ho. I'm Director of Capital Planning in the Office of Transportation Planning at MassDOT. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 2022 Capital Investment Plan this year, the approach we've taken and the focus on it. We're going to talk also about some new initiatives that we're introducing for this capital plan this year. And as Matt described in great detail, we're going to talk a little bit about the STIP and how the CIP and the STIP align and the relationship between the two different plans. It's very important. We'll finalize by talking about how you can use and explore the CIP. We have the interactive format, the remaining public meetings that are scheduled for this year's plan, and we're looking for your feedback at the end of the presentation this evening. So I'm just going to give a very brief overview about what is a capital plan, which we call the CIP. It's our annually produced budget document and policy document, and it programs all of the state and federal funds that the Commonwealth receives to pay for our long-term improvements to our transportation system. It includes investments in all of MassDOT and the MBTA's capital assets, and it includes all of the divisions. So it includes, besides the MBTA, MassDOT Highway, MassDOT Rail and Transit Division, the Aeronautics Division, our Registry of Motor Vehicles, and our Enterprise Services. So it really covers all of the types of investments we make in transportation, whether they be roads, roadways, bridges, bicycle and pedestrian investments, purchase of new transit vehicles, improvements to the track and signal programs, improvements at our Registry of Motor Vehicles, and improvements at our public use airports that are not managed and controlled by Massport. In 2017, we introduced a strategic framework that we have been using for the capital investment plan since then. We have 3 priorities: reliability, modernization, and expansion, with the focus since the 2017-2021 plan being on the first 2 priorities, primarily reliability and modernization. And when we talk about reliability priority, it's really what we are doing to invest to continue to maintain and improve the overall condition of the existing transportation network. The modernization priority makes that transportation system safer, more accessible, and to accommodate growth. It includes programs like our Red and Orange Line transformation program and our Complete Streets program, whereas our reliability program would be, think interstate pavement or highway bridges. Those are the types of programs. And then obviously there's projects that are prioritized for funding under each of those programs. In the expansion category, this covers our diverse transportation options throughout the Commonwealth. And it also is our investments that expand the capacity of our network. So our bicycle and pedestrian investments, because they're investments that would provide new types of transportation options, fall in this category, as well as investments in, say, our Green Line Extension program and South Coast Rail program that are both under construction. And the Green Line Extension program, as many know, is nearing completion and will be entering into revenue service at the end of this calendar year. In line with last year's capital plan, we've decided to continue with what we're calling a maintenance effort capital plan for 2022. The focus is really on continuing investments that were underway or scheduled to be underway. We are continuing to support our major capital programs, such as the Green Line Extension and South Coast Rail. We are including some targeted new investments that advance our goals and priorities that we have established for MassDOT and the MBTA, and we're really emphasizing, the emphasis was really on building a strong foundation for future funding opportunities. With the continued uncertainties as to what our federal surface transportation reauthorization legislation might look like in the future, since the current FAST Act was extended for only 1 year, we felt it prudent to not try to anticipate what we're going to get for federal fundings, but rather set the stage for how we can best take advantage of the federal funding opportunities that come to the Commonwealth, along with whatever happens in Washington with the federal infrastructure funding legislation that has been introduced. So both MassDOT and MBTA, on a development standpoint, continue to focus on the execution and optimization of our capital program, and to get prepared to make any changes as we move forward and get more information out of Washington on the capital plan. We had several goals that we set for this capital plan this year, and we tried to reinforce that in the development of our strategy and our targeted investments that we have. We want to really deliver a more strategic and performance-based capital plan. We've done, since the 2017 plan was first introduced, we've done a lot of multimodal planning, a lot of studies. We have statewide bicycle and pedestrian plans. We have statewide rail plans, statewide freight plans. The MBTA did Focus 40 and Rail Vision. So a number of planning efforts have been done since we first launched our strategic framework. We want to use those strategic planning efforts to really be driving and informing what we're trying to accomplish with our capital plan and our capital investments. So that was our first goal. And our second goal is to really build a capital program that reflects this multimodal strategy and connects our investments across our modes. So whether if you're doing a roadway project, you're not just paving a road, you're also adding bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure as part of that paving job in response to the healthy transportation compact that we have in the Commonwealth. The same goes for connections with the transit facilities. How we're investing in and connecting those modes is really important in the capital plan. And then finally, we're striving to better communicate what investments are included in our capital program and how those investments benefit all parts of the Commonwealth and all modes of transportation. The MBTA has a similar investment principles and approach for this capital plan, and I wanted to highlight that a little bit, considering that we're in the Boston region tonight. We're talking about the capital plan, and the MBTA network, transportation network, is such a significant portion of what the public experiences in the Boston region. So they too are continuing to prioritize and invest in their steady state asset replacement and modernization. They're upgrading their revenue fleet. They're procuring new electric hybrid buses for the Silver Line. They're overhauling their commuter rail locomotives and funding ongoing programs that replace their vans and sedans that are used by the ride. They've programmed a number of bridge and tunnel upgrades. One of the bridges that they have underway for funding is the replacement of the Gloucester Drawbridge. They're continuing with installation of automatic controls on the north side of the commuter rail system. They're completing the Braintree and Quincy Adams garage rehabilitation projects. But at the same time that they're prioritizing investing in steady state asset replacement, they're also continuing to invest in and support, as I mentioned, a number of really in-flight capital programs. So they're continuing with the Green Line extension program and project. As I mentioned, it is anticipated to commence revenue service at the end of this calendar year. So that's a huge benefit to the citizens of the Commonwealth. They're also continuing with phase 1 construction for the South Coast Rail program that will bring rail service to the cities of New Bedford and Fall River, as well as they're continuing to invest in improvements in vehicles, yards, track infrastructure, signals to support the red and orange line transformation. And they're continuing with their implementation of fare transformation to move the MBTA to a different type of automatic fare collection. They're also setting the stage to make targeted investments in the next round of transformation programs and set the foundation for future funding opportunities as we learn more what comes out of Washington and what we might be able to expect for the MBTA and our transit facilities across the Commonwealth, including the regional transit authorities. They're continuing with design and construction of the Quincy bus facility so that it can accommodate battery electric buses in the future. They're making additional investments in bus priority, passenger amenities, bus priority infrastructure and passenger amenities, as well as rail transformation. And they're doing a lot of work on the Green Line track and signals and stations as part of the overall Green Line transformation program. As many heard in the news of late, they talked about the B-Line station consolidation. So significant investments are ongoing in those areas. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the new initiatives we have, and they really stem from the transportation bond bill that the governor signed in January of this year, the $16.2 billion in authorization for MassDOT and the MBTA. And within the bond bill, a number of new programs were authorized that really look to address asset condition and congestion at the local level in the municipalities, as well as to enhance pedestrian transit assets and improve the condition of the MassDOT highway bridges. So in addition to some of the municipal partnership programs that we already have within the capital plan that we will be continuing to support and fund, such as the Small Municipal Bridge Program, the Chapter 90 program, and our Complete Streets program, we're launching 3 new programs that will support investments at the municipal level also. So we have a municipal pavement program, which was authorized at the bond bill at $100 million. We've programmed $15 million in anticipated spending and this program will focus on pavement improvement and repairs for municipally owned state routes. That's a significant investment in the roadways at the municipal level. We have heard in the past that the Chapter 90 funds are not necessarily sufficient to address all of the municipal pavement needs. And this program hopefully will help to augment those funds that are already made available to each through through the Chapter 9A program to each city and town in the Commonwealth. In addition to that, we were authorized to continue with the Shared Streets and Spaces program. This program was launched in 2020 in response to the COVID pandemic, and because it highlighted some existing mobility needs and created new ones. So this program that MassDOT launched was really to help the municipality meet their individual needs for safer outdoor recreation and commerce and community activities and mobility, with grants that range from $5,000 to $500,000. So for example, in Boston, you see a number of the parklets on the streets adjacent to the sidewalk. That's the type of investment that is supported through the Shared Streets and Spaces program. So it was $20 million authorized in the bond bill, and we're funding, we've included funding for $4 million in the 2022 capital plan. And finally, the last program that we are launching, and this was really launched, is the Local Bottleneck Reduction Program. And this is really launched in as a result of the report on congestion in the Commonwealth that was published in 2019 that had identified needs at the local level to address what we're calling localized operationally influenced bottlenecks. These are things that would negatively impact traffic flow. And this would fund sort of moderate, cost-effective congestion relief opportunities, either through a redesign of an intersection or restriping or lane or shoulder width adjustments and other types of investments. But again, at the local level. So all three of these programs are intended to be grants or partnerships with MassDOT with communities at the local level. The bond bill also authorized new funding that will be used to support improving the condition of what we're calling the National Highway System bridges across the Commonwealth. $1.25 billion was authorized in new grant anticipation notes. This is a type of funding that was used as part of the Accelerated Bridge Program that really addressed a lot of the mega bridges conditions in the Commonwealth. The Whittier Bridge, for example, was a brand new bridge that was built, funded through the Accelerated Bridge Program. Currently, the Highway Division, MassDOT Highway Division, is developing a list of eligible projects that will be funded with these new GANs. All of the projects that are eligible for funding will be added into the state transportation program through the appropriate TIP process. Say, for example, if there's a bridge that is in the Boston MPO region, it would get added to the Boston TIP and amended into the state transportation improvement program as required to be eligible for the federal funding. So all of these projects that will be selected and chosen and prioritized for funding with GANs must be federally eligible projects. So approximately overall $490 million is programmed in 2022 to improve the conditions of the bridges, and this includes anticipated funding of $15 million in new GANs. Matt did a great job summarizing the relationship between the STIP and the CIP. And again, as Matt mentioned, the STIP is a federally required plan that governs all of the federal highway investments, as well as the federal transportation grant awards that are received by the Commonwealth. It's dedicated to roadway and transit projects and subject to federal approval. And the federal fiscal year plan runs from October 1st of every year through September 30th of the following year. And it includes all the federal aid projects that are programmed by our 10 metropolitan planning organizations and 3 transportation planning organizations. So the Boston MPO is one of the largest MPOs of the 10 MPOs that are in the Commonwealth. And as I have another slide that shows all of the other MPOs and TPOs across the Commonwealth. One difference between the STIP and the CIP is that the STIP is an obligation document, whereas the CIP is actually the cash flow. So the STIP will program the federal funds for a particular project, and the CIP will show the expenditure of those funds over time. And as Matt mentioned, all the projects that are programmed in the STIP are incorporated into the CIP, and it really does comprise a large subset. The federal aid program comprises a large subset of the overall CIP. The nesting circle diagram, I'm going to walk you through it. As you can see at the bottom, the smallest circle is really the TIPs that the MPOs have, and then the STIP is the aggregation of all those 13 MPOs and TPOs. Those are all the transit and highway funds, federal aid funds that we receive in the Commonwealth. The next circle, the middle circle, are the other federal funds that the Commonwealth receives. So we receive federal aviation grants that the Aeronautics Division of MassDOT uses for investment at the public use airports throughout the Commonwealth. And we also receive federal Railroad Administration grants. And then finally, the large circle are the entire CIP with all the types of funds that the Commonwealth receives and programs for the transportation investments across the Commonwealth. And this is just a map showing all the MPOs in the Commonwealth. The three black areas are our three rural transportation planning organizations. So Franklin County, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket. But I think as Matt eloquently discussed, the MPOs and the TPOs are really the transportation policy decision-making bodies across the Commonwealth, and they're composed of local and state officials that play a really critical role in the development of the overall STIP, and well, the individual TIPs and the development of the overall STIP. So they meet annually to review and select eligible projects for funding with their allocation of the federal funds that they received into their 5-year transportation improvement program, otherwise known as the TIP. Collectively, all of those TIPs of the 13 MPOs and TPOs comprise the federal funded portion of the CIP, the STIP. And as Matt mentioned, they will be meeting, Boston MPO will be meeting this week to endorse their final TIP that'll be for the final STIP that we have in June, by the end of June, that we will be submitting to Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration. Actually, on this slide, I'm just going to give you an overview of what the size of the capital plan looks like for 2022. We have a plan of roughly $4 billion of investment in transportation investments program for spending for 2022, and that compares favorably with what we had programmed for spending in 2021, which was $3.7 billion. So it's about a $370 million increase overall. And the donut chart on the left reflects how those investments break down by priority, with the green being our reliability investments and the blue being our modernization investments. So as you can see, the green is roughly 45% of all of our investments across all of our divisions are focused on reliability, the priority reliability, and 27% on modernizing or improving our assets to make them safer. In addition, we have 17% of all of our transportation investments focused on the expansion category, which again is primarily investments that increase the capacity of the system or provide new transportation options. And then there's a Chapter 90 program, which is $200 million. It's at 5% and another 5% for some of our enterprise services and planning funds. Right at the top of the slide is how this breaks down by priority and division. So as you can see, highway and the MBTA, they're the largest divisions within MassDOT, and they comprise the bulk of the spending. As you can see, for highway under reliability, it's like $989 million, and for the T, it's $695 million. This is just sort of a snapshot of some of the investments that are in the Boston MPO region for MassDOT. There's another slide for the MBTA investments, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of some of the projects that are programmed for spending in 2022. So we have the 2022 funding amount and then the total cost of the project. As I mentioned, most of the projects that are programmed spent out over multiple years. And so we're giving you a snapshot of what we're going to spend in 2022, and then the total cost of the project that may have already spent some prior to 2022 or spending post 2022. So for example, just to talk about something that the Aeronautics Division has programmed, they're reconstructing a runway at Norwood Airport. The Highway Division is continuing to work on Chelsea Route 1 viaduct rehabilitation, southbound and northbound. We'll be starting the Sumner Tunnel reconstruction rehabilitation project, which is a big project for us. We have some lighting upgrades in Boston on the I-90 and MBTA Prudential Tunnel. Obviously, I think folks know about the North Washington Street Bridge. That's continuing. So this is some of the $50 billion is going to be spent in 2022 on that project. We're reconstructing Route 1A in Walpole. In Everett, we're reconstructing Ferry Street and a portion of Elm Street. And we have a pedestrian bridge rehabilitation project over the MBTA off Carlton Street. And then we're investing on the rail and transit in the Cape Ann Regional Transit Authority and the Metro West Regional Transit Authority for the RTAs. And this only reflects their state match. Their federal funds go directly to them. So this is not the full extent of the RTA's capital plan, but the bulk of the investments on the RTAs really focus on replacement of buses and support vehicles and preventive maintenance at their facilities. For the MBTA, this is just the top 10 projects in their project list. And again, when I get to the slide on how you can view the CIP, the full list of all of the investments, both for MassDOT divisions and the MBTA, is in the online version of the story map. So again, two big programs that they're continuing to invest in are the Green Line Extension and the South Coast Rail Program. They're doing automatic control on the North Side commuter rail facilities, as I mentioned. They have a number of ongoing investments for the Red and Orange Line. And I should point out that the little circles and the different colors reflect the different modes. So the little green circle is for the Green Line, the purple circle saying CRs for the commuter rail investments, the red line and orange line, they're the red and orange circles respectively. And for fare transformation, it says SW, that's statewide. And for the DMA replacement, which is hybrid electric fleet for the Silver Line, that's for the Silver Line, it's in the silver circle. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of investments that they have ongoing that will improve the overall service and reliability of the MBTA network. Oh, I went too far. So just to talk about how we publish our CIP, we have initiated in the last couple years, we've created what was called a virtual story map, and it provides the users an opportunity to really interact with the CIP content and also comment directly in the document on specific projects or even submit a general comment. We also do provide on our website a PDF version of the complete CIP that you can download if you prefer not to have to use the virtual story map. But we do think the story map, we've done a lot of work to make it user-friendly and interactive, so we hope people will take advantage and at least try it out. In lieu of in-person public meetings, as you heard at the beginning of the session tonight, we've organized virtual public meetings. This is the 4th virtual public meeting that we've had on the CIP, and we have 2 more to follow this week. And we focus primarily on the approach we're taking and give highlights of investments in a particular region. We do want to let you know how you can advance a project in the CIP, because I think that that's important, and for the public to understand that we do look for your comments and input on advancing a project. So we do go through, as I said before, we have extensive planning efforts, both at MassDOT and the MBTA. We did a lot of work with Rail Vision, Focus 40. We a lot of outreach when we were building the bicycle and pedestrian plans. It's a way for people to get involved, the public to get involved in any of those planning processes that we have, any of our public meetings that we host. And also, as Matt Genova pointed out, you can get involved through your local MPO and TPO planning and prioritization processes to help the MPOs or TPOs identify the projects that should be prioritized for funding with the federal funds that they're allocated to their entities. This is just a remaining look at the virtual public meetings that we have coming up. Tomorrow night, we have one at 6 o'clock with Southeastern Mass. And June 3rd, we have the Cape and the Islands. Again, they're all at 6 o'clock. They're all hosted by Zoom. The public comment period will close June 14th. So we do want to hear from you before then. You can use the CIP online comment tool that's embedded in the story map. And also, if you go to our website, you can access it. We're accepting emails, comments via email at masscip@state.ma.us. And we are also accepting letters. We'll take it any way you can give it to us. We really do encourage folks to engage with municipal leaders about priorities for transportation projects, whether you get involved at the CIP process or whether you can get involved to the local MPO TPO process. We want the public to get involved, to let us know what they what is of interest and how which projects they would like to see prioritized for funding. This is just a snapshot of the CIP online comment tool that's embedded in the story map. And as I said, it's an interactive map. It allows users to click on a particular area of the Commonwealth to search by a division, to search by, say, a roadway or a bridge. You want to see bridges. You can search in a number of different ways. We've done a lot of work to enhance the search capabilities of the tool. And on the left is how you can filter the projects, and on the right is how you can leave a comment. You could even enter your own address, and it'll pop up with the investments that are in the area near your address. And you can also submit a non-specific comment using the tool. And it went live. I should have changed that. It went live on May 25th. So we do want to talk a little bit about why it's important to get your public comments. So we'll take public comments on existing projects. We share these comments with our project managers, and those are taken into account as the project is developed or implemented. We take comments in support of future projects that are not currently programmed in the CIP. That information is shared with our internal stakeholders to note the level of public interest in the project. We do encourage comment and support of specific CIP programs, and those are used to help us drive next year's investments and set 5-year priorities. And though we're focused on a 1-year CIP for this year, we do intend to launch a revamped 5-year CIP as the financial picture coming out of Washington becomes clear as to what we can expect in the Commonwealth. And as we understand, when people start to go back to work, what does that mean in terms of demands and needs for our transportation network? We do like to get general public comments because they shape how we set our investment priorities and how we select our projects that are included in the CIP for funding, and also, how we communicate the progress of our capital investments to the public is important for us to hear, so we can understand, are we getting the right message out there? Are we communicating correctly? Are what we are investing in the right investments for the Commonwealth? So I want to thank you for listening to us tonight. Our CIP is at our website, mass.gov/mass./CIP. It has the draft 2022 capital investment plan, as well as it has the other plans from the prior years. But if you click on the 2022 capital investment plan, it'll take you to the story map. Or as I said, there's also a PDF version of the full CIP story map plus appendices available on the website. And comments, you can go to masscip@state.ma.us to email us, or the online comment tool. And the address for sending letters is mass.legislative and public affairs 10 Park Plaza, room 4160, Boston, Mass. 02116. And with that, I'll turn it back to Patrick for public comment. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Michelle, for that great presentation. Before we move over to public comment, I would just like to ask that any elected officials that would like to speak, please use the raise hand function now. I see a couple here, so I'm going to start from the first one I see, and that is Representative Mike Conley. Hi, Representative. Is that working?
Awesome.
Yep, there we go.
Terrific. Well, thank you for hosting the meeting, and thank you to MassDOT. My name is Mike Connolly. I serve as state representative for parts of Somerville and Cambridge. There's many things I could talk about here. In general, I support the electrification of public transit over the continued use of the combustible engine, and I support the expansion and improvement of our public transit systems. But my top priority for this capital investment plan is to respectfully ask that MassDOT program the $2 million line item for East Somerville sound walls that our legislative delegation had included in the recent transportation bond bill that Governor Baker signed into law earlier this year. And in addition, I ask that you program the $2 million item that our Somerville delegation secured for Route 2838 safety improvements. Back in December, MassDOT presented to our community that urgently needed road safety improvements would begin construction in the summer of 2022 as part of the Route 2838 intersection safety improvements project. These improvements are intended to address a top 200 crash location where 3 pedestrians have been killed by automobiles in recent years. However, last month it was announced that the road safety project wouldn't begin construction until 2023. And it was further revealed that an I-93 viaduct preservation project would begin construction later this year in the very same area. MassDOT says the goal of the I-93 preservation project is to, quote, preserve the life of the steel on the interstate's automobile viaduct. Well, last week, over 250 Somerville residents joined with us and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and Mayor Curtatone to really try to send the message that as MassDOT looks to preserve the life of that I-93 viaduct, we ask that you work with us to take action to preserve the lives of our constituents. And that means addressing the road safety dangers, and that means addressing the air pollution and the sound pollution that is also correlated with documented increases in cardiovascular disease, and it's been associated with an increased impact of COVID-19 in the environmental justice communities of East Somerville and along Mystic Avenue in Somerville. So just wrapping up here, want to emphasize this point that our legislative delegation, we have done all the work that we can do. We have brought MassDOT officials right to these deadly intersections. We've done meetings with MassDOT officials regarding the sound pollution. And then when we had our chance in the transportation bond bill, we succeeded in getting these line items included in that bill to address these concerns. So we're really here this evening to ask you to work with us to add, in addition to the money that's already been allocated for these 2 projects, to go ahead and add each of these $2 million line items so that we can have faster and better road safety improvements, and so that we can begin to mitigate the sound pollution and the air pollution. Look forward to continuing to work with all of my colleagues who are on the call with me here. And again, we respectfully ask that you work with us to ensure that this project really meets the environmental justice standards that we laid out in that recent climate roadmap law that really calls on MassDOT and all entities as they move forward with new projects to be particularly attuned to the environmental justice considerations, including in environmental justice communities such as East Somerville and along the Mystics. So with that, I'll just say thank you and looking forward to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Representative. Next hand I see is Representative Christine Barber.
Thank you. And thank you to MassDOT for hosting and for taking comments. I'm Christine Barber, State Representative for the 34th Middlesex District, representing Somerville and Medford. I'll keep my comments brief as well. You're likely to hear from a number of my constituents tonight. I wanted to note a few critical projects, including the one that Rep. Connolly was just talking about, and I would urge MassDOT to include these projects in the CIP. So in our community, we fought for years to bring the Green Line extension, which is a legal requirement under the Clean Air Act, and we are grateful that this project is nearly completed. When the project began, it contained a terminus at Route 16 and Mystic Valley Parkway that serves a number of environmental justice communities in an area that faces intense traffic congestion. This phase 2 of the GLX could improve mobility in the entire corridor and boost ridership, but also provide a more equitable distribution of transit services. This phase 2 of the Green Line was actually programmed by the MPO and in MassDOT's capital plan previously. In 2016, those funds were reprogrammed to support phase 1 of the GLX. And when that happened, there was a commitment from then Secretary Pollock to complete an environmental impact study on phase 2. Following that up, we did get a requirement for the EIR in the recently passed transportation bond bill, and again, funds for that environmental impact review. So I ask that the CIP include the environmental impact review for the GLX phase 2 in next year's plan. The second area I want to comment on is the same that Rep. Connolly just mentioned. Mystic Ave and McGrath Highway is an incredibly dangerous, one of the most dangerous intersections in the state, where 3 members of our community have been killed, but countless others fear for their lives every time they cross the street to get to the grocery store or take the bus. Particularly for families in my district who live there, it's just a very challenging place to live. And people are harmed by living next to I-93 without any noise barriers. We know this is not the only environmental justice community impacted by a highway, but we need to start to undo the harm to all communities that have borne these really difficult conditions. So as was mentioned, we've been working with MassDOT on safety improvements, and we're happy that there were a number of safety improvements coming with federal money, but that those were recently put off as MassDOT works to preserve the steel of the I-93 viaduct. Our community has been waiting for basic safety and ADA accommodations for decades, for much too long. And we're asking MassDOT to use the money that was authorized in the bond bill, both to improve the Route 2838 corridor's safe pedestrian safety, and also to use the $2 million for noise barriers from the bond bill as well, and to fund both of those projects for pedestrian safety and noise barriers. These projects are urgently needed for the safety and health of our communities, and they simply can't wait any longer. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative. I see Senator Jalen here. I'm going to ask you to unmute now.
Thank you. And I'm grateful for this chance to comment on the CIP. I'm going to second the comments of my colleagues, Representatives Connolly and Barber. I'm State Senator Pat Jelen. I represent Somerville, Medford, Cambridge, and Winchester. And I've written letters to all, but we have many constituents here who would like to present testimony. And I also don't want to reiterate all of the important points made by my colleagues. So I'll just summarize my requests for your support for important and urgent projects. First, please include the $5 million to restart the environmental impact report for the final phase of the Green Line extension into Medford Hillside. This would make good on an important commitment from 2016 And as Rep. Barber pointed out, money was reprogrammed from building that station and moved to build phase 1. The EIR is required in the recent transportation bond bill, and I urge DOT to begin that process again. Second, please include at least $2 million for noise barriers in East Somerville. I-93 is dangerous to the health of thousands of people in the environmental justice community along I-93. Particulate matter from up to 7 lanes of traffic causes serious health problems, including deaths. Third, please include at least $2 million for pedestrian bike safety, as well as pollution protection in the Route 2838 corridor. This area is extremely dangerous for pedestrians. And as you've heard, there have been 3 recent fatalities. Thank you for considering these requests and those of our neighbors. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Senator Jalen. So now I see Council President Matt McLaughlin. I'm going to ask you to unmute now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. Matt McLaughlin, Ward 1 City Councilor, which is East Somerville, and City Council President. I do want to speak very quickly about highway safety, but I know that there'll be many residents who will address this issue, and I support everything that they're asking for and everything that the Somerville Alliance of Safe Streets is requesting. But I'd like to spend most of my time talking about sound barriers because I feel like this is something that gets forgotten. And just talk about a brief timeline about the past 70 years that we've been dealing with this issue in East Somerville. When I-93 was built, they did not build sound barriers in East Somerville, and the stated reason in the convoluted history of this is that the neighbors did not want sound barriers. When I talked to neighbors today, they say that never happened. They said that they didn't want a highway, and they got that anyways without wanting that itself. And then in the meantime, 10 Hills, which is a neighborhood in Somerville, got sound barriers as well. But right across the street, the Mystic Projects, they do not have sound barriers. In the meantime, Somerville won the Green Line extension due to air pollution caused by I-93. And we were owed the Green Line extension because of this. But decades later, the air pollution is still not being addressed in East Somerville. The stated reason for the Green Line extension is not actually being addressed. And the MBTA recently released a study that showed that the Green Line extension is mostly going to impact wealthy white residents, while people who live close to the highways are still dealing with the problems that was supposed to be addressed with the Green Line extension. Decades later, we had a community walk. Mike Connolly was there, the mayor was there, many Mass DOT representatives came out, and they basically addressed a lot of issues, and I appreciate that. But when it came to sound barriers, they said there's a list and you're not on the list and you can't get on the list. And the only way you can get on the list is with new construction. Now there is new construction and we're told that it's not the right kind of new construction, so we still can't get sound barriers. And then we were told after that, that the viaduct may not be able to hold the sound barriers, but this was an argument we've never heard in the 70 years of dealing with this issue. The viaduct holds the sound barriers at 10 Hills, and when this was first built, when they claimed that the residents rejected sound barriers, it was never said, oh, well, we can't build that for you because the viaduct won't support it. So I'm giving you this whole history just to feel like, I just feel like there's something not being said about why we can't get these sound barriers, some unspoken reason that we're just being ignored on this issue. I can't think it's a money issue because we have our state representatives here who have all advocated and gotten the money, which is readily available to Mass DOT if they so want to do this. So the money exists. Maybe it's a bureaucracy issue and it's an inability to think outside the box and just prioritize something, knowing that everyone else in the Commonwealth is probably asking for the same thing. And I do understand that. I'm very passionate about this. It bothers me that it's taken so long and that after decades of advocacy from residents and from state representatives and from city officials, that nothing's been done on this issue just yet. And now we have a golden opportunity to address this and it's not being addressed. I don't want to go at public servants who are dealing with issues all over the state. I know you all have a lot of work to do all across the Commonwealth and people are pulling you in 100 different directions. But this is one of those instances where you actually have more power than anyone in the state to address this issue. Our state representatives can't address this. Our mayor can't address it. The city council can't address it. Maybe the governor can, but you are the people who can address this issue. And if you can't address this, I would like to know, who do I have to speak to who can address this issue? Where's the finger on the button that needs to press this to make things happen? I just want to reiterate to all of you that you have the power to dramatically improve people's lives in the city. I hope that you own that and you be proud of the fact that you can help people in this community and dramatically improve their standard of living. So I'm just begging you, please help us on this. Don't ignore this request just because people aren't yelling from the mountaintops over it. It's going to help people improve their public health, their respiratory illnesses, pedestrian safety. It's just an all-around important thing to address the safety and health of people in this community.
Thank you. So now I am going to go to Somerville City Councilor Mark Niedergang. I apologize, by the way, if I mess up some names here.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. No, you pronounced my name correctly. Good job. Thank you so much. I'm Mark Niedergang. I'm the Ward 5 City Councilor in Somerville, and I'm the chair of the Traffic and Parking Committee of the City Council. I want to support everything that Senator Jalen, Representatives Connolly and Barber, and Council President McLaughlin have said. I'll just add that the City Council unanimously passed a resolution asking for all of these things, and that the City Council and the mayor signed it as well, are 100% united and feel that this is one of the top priorities for the city in terms of traffic safety. So specifically, we want the $2 million for noise barriers and to protect residents from fine particle pollution. We also want the $2 million for improvements to Route 28, Route 38. And the reason we want these is because it's about saving lives. People are dying, as you've heard, and putting this money in the capital investment program will allow these roadways to be fixed more quickly. Specifically, we want to see the Blakely Avenue crossing, where somebody died and it got killed in April in a crash. We want to see the Kensington Connector, which is right by the I-93 on-ramp. We want to see that fixed with some kind of physical infrastructure that will prevent people from getting run over there. And we want to see Shore Drive and Mystic Avenue fixed. These are three areas that people have been killed at by motor vehicles, pedestrians, and we want to see those fixed this year. So we're hoping that if this extra money is provided, the project, the Route 2838 project, can be expedited, moved up, and hopefully this work can be done this summer because it's about saving lives. We do appreciate the funds for the Green Line, as overdue as it is, but now it's time to invest in saving lives in this burdened community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So next I am going to go to Somerville City Councilor Jesse Klingon.
Thank you. Thank you all for this time. I also want to reiterate what many of my esteemed colleagues have said about funding and making sure that the impact study report is funded, as well as the improvements to 28 and 38. I've lost constituents myself down on Mystic Avenue. As you all know, it's a very dangerous area. So certainly all of these safety improvements need to be prioritized. But I especially want to reiterate something that Councilor McLaughlin said, although with my own little sort of twist to it, is that, they said when there was some sort of construction, we could get the sound barriers, sound walls, which will mitigate hopefully some pollution and the sound as well. We have that construction coming. And at this point, to me, again, whether it's something unsaid or whatever, it's ultimately, it's it's very perplexing, I think, to people who live that close to a highway when they drive out of the city and there's these beautiful round cement walls with seagulls imprinted on them and different animal figures that are essentially protecting trees when we have a highway coming directly through our city and quality of life issues. I mean, is it going to solve everything? You live near a highway? No, but is it going to vastly improve conditions for those of us living right next to the highway? Absolutely. So I think it's high time, you know, at this point where we're asking the people at Somerville to once again have to deal with a major project where there's going to be diversions of everything from 18-wheelers and such through the neighborhoods. I would ask that you please revisit sound walls, sound barriers along the viaduct that includes my ward of Ward 4 along Mystic Ave to the Medford line. That is a residential area, and they deserve sound barriers. And so I ask that you reconsider it and hopefully are able to rally it and get some funding with this. Perhaps maybe it could be rolled into this this upcoming project, some sort of a barrier. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to move over to the public comment section of our presentation tonight. So just as a reminder, you can use the raise hand button. If you're on a landline, use *9, or any other phone, use *9. And I will ask you to unmute yourself. So here we go. I'll start right now with the first one. I see John Buxton.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you very much. We are at a time in our neighborhoods, in our state, in our country, that can only be said to be, this is the time not for business as usual, not for continuing what you have been doing for many years, but to focus on environmental justice and economic justice. Before you plan or fund any of these things, you need to think, what impact does it have on our under-resourced communities, which in this area means those Somerville persons who are impacted by the noise and air pollution. It also includes the fact that we have so many essential workers in Chelsea who have to commute for long periods of time to come into their jobs in Boston. These are the kinds of things that need to be done. And one other thing which won't cost DOT a penny is to make our roads safer by banning electronic billboards. They are made to distract drivers, and that is a totally unacceptable way for Mass DOT to continue operations. So I ask you to have this priority question of, what will this do to our under-resourced communities? Will it be for their benefit first and not at their expense second? Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment, and I'd love to hear your comments back.
Thank you for your comment, John. Just first, I want to apologize. I missed one elected official here, so I'm going to turn it over to Wilma to speak now.
Thank you, Matt. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. No, I just also wanted to, since I'm in attendance, and take the opportunity to appreciate, you know, you and your staff for taking the time to, you know, like come and present your plans to us. As you probably already know, and it's been mentioned by almost every other elected official, that we are an environmental justice community. And the same, you know, folks that are struggling with air and noise pollution, the same folks still have to suffer with traffic safety. And so, and also it was also noted that we had 3 recent fatalities. I guess one of the things that is even striking me is like how many more people need to die before something needs to be done. And so I just want to encourage you to, add among your goals, because I know you had pedestrian on one of the slides, add also people with disabilities. And also just to reiterate that I want to advocate for like the $2 million for noise barriers, and also the $2 million for improvement to Route 28 and 38 corridor, including dense tree cover along Mystic Ave and Forest Park, and an expanded and accelerated road safety improvement project with elements such as raised crosswalk, sidewalk level protected bike lanes facilities, ADA compliant pedestrian ramps, and road diet for Route 28 north of Broadway. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right, thank you. Next one I see is Alicia Hunt. So I will ask her. Hello. Next person I saw was Alicia Hunt, asking her to unmute now.
Good evening. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I am the Director of Planning, Development, and Sustainability for the City of Medford. We're very pleased to have this opportunity to comment on the plan and honestly to reiterate some of the things that I've heard this evening. We are pleased to see the municipal pavement program to help with improvements and repairs on municipally owned state routes. I'm hopeful that we could get some of that funding in Medford with all the number of state routes in Medford. We both have city managed, municipally managed roads, as well as the state managed roads in our city. We've really appreciated the shared streets and spaces funding here in the city. It's allowed us to do things we've never been able to do before. And in particular, to move forward some of the bus shelters we've been trying to get in the city for many years. So we're very happy that we've been able to get some of that funding. And I'm hopeful that this will increase the opportunity for things like bus shelters, including in Medford. While the intersection of Route 28 and 38 is in Somerville, it is right on the Medford border. There is a lot, it is frequently used by Medford residents. That intersection desperately needs safety improvements. I myself have had my husband in a major accident in that intersection at one point. We would really like to see that funding move forward, as has been discussed by the state delegation. Medford's also very appreciative of the continued funding for the Green Line extension. We're very excited to see the portion that's funded so far open this winter. However, we would very much like to see the funding for the Green Line extension environmental impact report for the extension to Route 16. We need this information to inform our public conversations and to move forward with this project. It's an important commitment from 2016. So thank you very much for this opportunity to comment this evening, and I appreciate hearing all the other comments as well.
All right, thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Salma Mohammed, asking you to unmute now.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Salma. I'm just a regular American citizen. I wanted to address a concern regarding a specific concern. And my concern is with the number 14 route specifically. I've had an issue with it for the past year now. It doesn't run regularly and it doesn't run on Sundays. And the last bus runs at 7 p.m., which is really inconvenient to me when I have to get to work and where I travel from. And I was wondering, is there a way to fix that?
All right. Thank you for your comment. I am going to Emily Vides now.
Hi. I'm a resident of Mystic Ave. I live in Ward 4 and I live right on Mystic Ave. My across the street neighbor is Route 93. And I feel completely held hostage by MassDOT. The conditions on Route 38 are unlivable. Cars are driving at highway speeds through the city next to my house. And there's nothing I can do about it. If this happens in a city street, I know who to call, but I don't live on a city street. I live on a state road. So who do I call? I don't know. I'm talking to you right now, and that's great, but there's no communication with the residents here. We have people dying regularly on the street. When we cross the street that we live on, there's a risk that you might die every single time. Cars speed, there's never any police presence. And, you know, frankly, I think we've all had enough and we need change now. We need speed mitigation. We need this. I'm sorry, I'm a little worked up because I get very angry when I think about this, because these are not problems that exist in other communities. When people die in other communities, the state does something about it. When people die along Mystic Ave and the McGrath Highway, nothing happens. And it's about time that things happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. I'm going to move next to Derek Rice. I'm asking him to unmute now.
Great, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Derek Rice. I'm a Somerville resident. Michelle talked about a thorough public engagement process with residents participating as projects are being planned, but that hasn't been the case for Somerville and the currently proposed I-93 Viaduct Preservation Project, which runs through Somerville. That project was dropped on us as a 100% planning complete project. Meanwhile, our pollution and road safety project has been delayed while sitting at 25% complete. Some of us have the luxury of sitting at this meeting with clean air and trees in the background. Many of my neighbors have traffic noise and exhaust instead. We jump in our multi-ton vehicles and listen to podcasts. Many of my neighbors play a literal game of Frogger with their lives. I'm calling on MassDOT to prioritize preserving human lives over the lives of steel, to expedite pedestrian safety projects that are already planned, and to add sound and pollution mitigation to the viaduct preservation in Somerville and other impacted communities. These investments, the 6 million already pending for the intersection safety work, plus the additional 4 million line items allocated by our state legislation, are small requests in comparison to the 37 million for the preservation work. As Councilor McLaughlin said, you seem to be the people to make the decision here, so I hope you will do so. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Next, I am going to go to Abby Swain, asking her to unmute now.
Hi, thanks for calling on me. I'm a representative, an advocacy representative for the Greater Boston chapter of United Spinal, which represents folks who use wheelchairs due to spinal cord injury and disease. And I had a couple of questions and a comment. I guess I'll probably not get answers to the questions, but I was wondering what the most effective way to support the accessibility projects in the draft plan would be. I'm glad at first reading to see what looks like all of the projects that Laura Brailsford of System-Wide Accessibility features when she reports to the Riders Transportation Access Group. But do disability advocates such as my group need to speak out in favor to ensure that they don't get short shrift relative to other potential funding targets? And then I don't see among the line items funding for the Rides on Demand paratransit pilot featured. And that's an important way, both for the Commonwealth to save money on folks who don't really need to use ride vehicles and ride drivers, but could instead use an accessible vehicle operated by Uber and Lyft. And then I was wondering what the meaning of the table on page 232 is that shows reductions in funding for failed and missing curb ramps over the years. I'm hoping it's a way of justifying a sizable jump in funding because the lack of curb cuts is a really huge barrier to basic mobility for those who use wheelchairs. They can be forced to not make a trip at all or to detour very indirectly. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you so much for that comment. I am going to go next to Mary Caseso. Asked her to unmute.
Hi.
Oh,
thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to add my voice in support of both projects. The barriers to reduce the noise pollution and as well for the pedestrian safety crossing, the $2 million. I grew up in Somerville and I'm in the nunnery grounds, and my house was the last house beside I-93 when the others were leveled to make way for the construction. And many of the neighbors did have cardiovascular disease and lung disease from being in that strip of homes without any protection. And it was sad to see people lose their lives. And the data from Doug Brugge's research has been very helpful to understand the harm caused. And so with this opportunity and the funds, it would be the right thing to do for that community. My family is all still living there. And so I want to add my voice also for the crossing and the safety in not only the East Somerville area, but to cross over to Mystic, but for the Ward 4 residents as well. I'm going to go a little further up the street though, because while I don't live in the nunnery grounds anymore, I walk to visit all of my family that's still there. And even crossing the McGrath and O'Brien Highway up by Highland Avenue where I do, it is a scary crossing. The street light, when you do get the walk button, gives you about 8 seconds to cross all those lanes. And it's only worse as attested by folks with the accidents. And it was such a moving moment seeing the son of someone who recently passed away with Congresswoman Ayanna Presley. So it's a devastating impact on the neighborhood. And this is such an opportunity with so much support to move this project up. It's been a lot of years. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Ryan Kirakofe, asking him to unmute now.
Hi, good evening. Thanks very much for having this meeting. My name is Ryan Kirikoff. I live in East Somerville. Just want to say I'm very proud of my elected officials this evening. I'll echo them in strongly encouraging the investment of at least $2 million for accelerating these safety improvements near Mystic and McGrath Highway, and at least $2 million for sound barriers near East Somerville. While we know investments in maintaining urban highways like 93 may be necessary, we also know that these tend to benefit and serve wealthier, further out communities at the often direct expense of lower and middle income communities closer to the urban core. And that's in terms of safety, neighborhood connections, health, and economic development. And for these reasons, investment in urban highways needs to be connected to investment in those communities that feel more of those highways' negative effects. They cannot and should not be separated or delayed. So please advance these critical investments now. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I am next going to go to Galen Mook here.
Let's see, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks everybody for putting this on. I also want to thank all the elected officials, especially from Somerville, for turning out and echoing your constituents' concerns. It's super important that we have a legislative backing to the administration's process here, and for all the other electeds who are here as well. My name is Galen Mook. I'm an Alston resident, but I'm also the executive director of Mass Bike, the Massachusetts Bicycle Coalition, which does statewide bike advocacy. So we're going to have a robust set of comments before the deadline of the 14th. I just kind of wanted to bring a few points to the top now, since this is being officially recorded. First, I want to thank Patrick and your team for bringing this to all the communities throughout the Commonwealth. It's not easy to represent the states and all the interests. One of the things that keeps reminding me of the needs is the overarching concerns, one around safety of people who are trying to cross the street or bike on the street or use wheelchairs in the street. And so I would like to see the CIP and pretty much all of the DOT philosophy focus on safety of those most vulnerable, as opposed to just throughput and accessing a throughway of interchanges or the bottleneck prevention, where it's about getting cars through intersections. I think what we need to do is really refocus to say, where is the safety aspects for those who are most likely to be seriously injured and killed out there. So one of the concerns I have specifically in a new program being featured is the governor's bottleneck prevention program, or however it's being phrased. My apologies for not having my notes in front of me, which as I read it is a little bit more about getting cars through intersections, where I would really like to reframe that project to really be about getting people through intersections. So more people on transit, where you can fit 60 to 80 people on a bus versus in single occupancy vehicles. And not just that, but getting people safely through intersections, because that's where we know most of the major crashes and fatalities happen for bicyclists and pedestrians are at intersections. So really having a safety first focus in the bottleneck program. Secondly, I do want to commend the DOT and applaud it for the Shared Streets and Spaces program, which I know is pretty much a brand new thing that came out of the COVID response and is being codified here, or at least being built into the program. I think we all know that was hugely successful for municipalities across the Commonwealth, and it elevated biking and walking and transit and just like crosswalk concerns, basic, simple stuff. But it gave municipalities the power, the money, and kind of the backing and the cultural authority to make safer places for people within their municipalities. So not only do I want to applaud the DOT, but I want to recommend that we beef up that program like tenfold, because I also know that there were about twice as many applicants than could have been funded this past year, and it was a resounding success. So kudos, but let's do more with the Shared Streets and Spaces. So I appreciate that. And then, not to comment on any particular specific projects, because again, I'll probably have something a little bit more robust in a collective letter by the 14th, but specifically regarding the Alston I-90 interchange, as it's being presented here in the CIP. I'm very much concerned the DOT is prioritizing, let me see if I can read it here, funding for design and permitting only, whereas we know the deficiencies, not just of the turnpike itself and the viaduct, but the surrounding roads and sidewalks that the neighborhood has to go through every day in order to leave the Alston neighborhood are deteriorating to the point where the DOT is having to close down sidewalks for fear that they will crumble into the turnpike below. So to only have funding available in the CIP right now for design and permitting completely negates the safety aspect, which is kind of already focused on in the maintenance and the sustainability of projects. What we really need to do is focus on those who are most vulnerable, including those on bike and on foot and in wheelchairs and in strollers and walking from the store. And specifically with the Alston I-90 project, if you're going to put any funding into it now, you also really need to include addressing the patchwork, not just to fix the viaduct, but to fix the sidewalks, to make the crossings of the footbridges over I-90, to make them ADA accessible, which they are not. And just to remind you that though this is a short-term CIP, we've been putting up with this for about 7 years worth of project with the DOT and have had zero response or zero actual action to make our roads, sidewalks, and pathways and bikeways any safer. So my main comment specifically about that project is focus on what can be done in the immediate to make it safer for people to actually walk and bike to and from the neighborhood that are also going to be part of this I-90 project, as well as focusing on the design and permitting, which we all know has already taken 7 years, probably going to take at least 7 years more. So we can't wait that long as our sidewalks literally are becoming more and more deteriorated to the point where they're being shut down. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak here and for everybody who is on this call. And I appreciate the ability to have a robust public process.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to Terry Alther next. Asking him to unmute now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Terry Altair. I live in West Newton. Before I start, I just want to say I have a lot of friends in Somerville, and the issue that's been discussed tonight regarding the sound walls and the safety of Route 38 is something I've heard a lot, and I'm very pleased to hear that there are a lot of people in Somerville who care about this issue. And I just want to say from Newton, I support you 100%. I was here tonight though, because I want to talk about an issue that pertains to Newton. Basically, there's been word that's been received that for the 2022 to 2026 transportation improvement plan, that the accessibility improvements for the 3 commuter rail stations in Newton, Auburndale, West Newton, and Newtonville, those have been dropped. And this is extremely unfortunate because the funding has been secured for a long time. Almost 20 years ago, then Congressman Barney Frank secured the $3 million in federal funding for to ensure that when the stations were improved, that they would be improved upon. And then our state representatives, Kay Khan and Ruth Balzer, along with our state senator, Cynthia Stone Cream, is also ensured, we get similar guarantees from the state. Especially since the MBTA completed the design for all 3 stations in 2019 and had a robust process informing the community of how they were going to improve these stations and ensuring that there be a second platform, since currently only one platform serves for each side on the stations, when 2 would be nice, so that way inbound and outbound each get their own platform. This is extremely unfortunate, and I don't think I'm the only one who's told the MBTA how extremely inaccessible and depending on which station you're at, unsafe it can be to walk down stairwells to get onto the commuter trains. Basically right now, in where I live in West Newton, thankfully our staircases are fine, so we don't generally have an issue, though, obviously if it's snowing, be extra careful. But like, I have friends who live in Newtonville, and they've been very frustrated with the fact that not only is their staircases a lot less stable, but they've had to deal with the station being closed a few times the last couple of years because of the fact that the staircases would deteriorate rather quickly. Considering the fact that we have a lot more housing units that are starting to come online, especially in Newtonville, we really need these improvements to happen, basically within the 2022 to 2026 time frame. And especially with the fact that with the pandemic becoming, starting to come to an end. And I think this really goes to the point that Galen Mook was trying to say earlier about how the goal really isn't to try to improve, congestion, but rather try to really alleviate it and ensure that it's the pedestrians and the transit riders who are able to really get better, get the bang out of their buck this time. I really think that the plan, and obviously, there's a lot of good things in the plan, don't get me wrong, but I really think the transit improvement plan is really missing a huge opportunity here at trying to ensure that we can finally get, accessible platforms and also accessible features for Auburndale, West Newton, and Newtonville. And I think it would be a big shame for the state to miss this opportunity. This has been a huge political issue for a while now, and especially since the northern communities of Newton don't have as it's not as easy for us to get in and out using public transit per se. Like, this is having an accessible station, especially if we're going to have more commuter rail service on the Worcester commuter rail line in the near future, would be a big help. And it would also encourage people to take transit rather than take I-90, which is already congested as hell as it is. Pardon my French. And then another thing I'd say is recently there has been a pilot to basically have people take a shuttle bus, since it seems like it's not feasible to have commuter trains stop by the 3 Newton stations during rush hour, which I understand. Obviously this is what happens when they only have one platform serving both tracks. But I will say, with regards to that shuttle service, I really wish that the MBTA would have promoted it a lot more and really gotten the community in the loop, just as they did with the station improvement plans. And especially since I'm very concerned that if the and I guess this is also in part because of the pandemic, so it's not 100% the MBTA's fault, but I'm just concerned that, you know, if the shuttle ridership's low, the MBTA is gonna just get rid of that altogether. And I actually think the shuttle's purpose is really nice, and I think there's a potential for it. Now, granted, obviously, the solution to that would be, you know, getting, you know, the platforms like built, you know, the 2 accessible platforms being built per each station. But I think for the short term, I think it's a good solution, and I really want to ensure that, you know, that the MBTA does more to inform Newton about this option, because I think this is a good interim solution. But I do want to, you know, I really do hope that the MBTA does include the 3 Newton stations as part of the transit improvement plan, and on top of that, ensure that work is continuing to make the Green Line stations more accessible, and not just in Newton, but all across the D branches. I know there's been a huge effort there, and there are many Newton residents who want to ensure that the work isn't just seen to, you know, 50% or 75% complete, but finished all the way to 100%. So those are my remarks. I just want to say thank you for having this opportunity, and I really hope that that basically the writers of the transit improvement plan reconsider removing Auberdale, Newtonville, and West Newton from the plan, because I really think this should be an important facet of the plan, and it's a shame if and I think it'd be an overlooked opportunity if the improvements for those 3 stations aren't included in the 2022 to 2026 transit improvement plan. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go next to Matthew Barrison, asking him to unmute now.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to comment. I live in East Boston, so I'm going to talk about something different than what we've heard tonight, although I certainly appreciate all the advocacy around Somerville sound walls. I'd like to advocate for the red-blue connector. This is another project that was supposed to have been built as mitigation for the big dig that never got done, that's been shelved and in purgatory for some time. Now, with the major expansion of Mass General Hospital on Lower Cambridge Street, this is the opportunity. And I encourage that funds be put together, not for more studies, I think it's been studied to death, but to be constructed, to be built. This would be a major connection point between the red line and the blue line, and would open up a lot of transit ridership, lowering stress on the harbor tunnels and lowering the negative environmental impact of all of the cars that are coming back to the airport and the impact that that has on the East Boston community. So that's my comment for the MBTA on expansion. I'd also like to make a comment for Mass Highway, for the Highway Division regarding Route 1A. Route 1A has many structurally deficient elements. The East Boston Expressway, the viaduct portion of 1A that is elevated, is structurally deficient and needs to be repaired now. Furthermore, the General Edwards Bridge, the bridge between Revere, Point of Pines, and Lynn, the Lynnway on 1A, is in terrible condition and needs to be repaired or replaced. And that is a particularly interesting area for a bicycle connection to be made. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go next to Megan Talkington. Asking her to unmute now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. My name is Megan Talkington, and I'm a resident of Somerville in the Winter Hill area. I live a few blocks from the intersection of Mystic Ave and Wheatland Street. So like many others here, I'd like to advocate that funding be used to make surface roadway improvements in and around the Mystic McGrath intersection, particularly to improve the safety of pedestrians and MBTA bus riders. I guess what I want to say is that residents in this community should be able to walk and ride around our neighborhood on surface streets. So that includes, as we've said, crossing McGrath at all sensible spots, not just at a few select intersections, and crossing under 93 between East Somerville and Winter Hill, and then 10 Hills and Assembly Row. And this work should happen in a timely fashion and not be put off. In addition, any work to I-93 in this area, sound and pollution mitigation should be a key component. So I'm saying that I'm adding my voice to advocate for these things because I understand that our comments are what's being asked for here. I'm kind of new at this. But for me, really, this is a question. I want to hear if these projects aren't going to get going in a timely fashion, why not? I want to understand. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. I'm going to go now to Jennifer Atwood.
Hi, I'm the director of East Somerville Main Streets. We're a nonprofit that supports small local businesses in East Somerville. You might be asking, what do small businesses have to do with traffic safety? But in order for our small businesses to survive and thrive, we need people to be able to access them without risking their lives to do so. East Somerville is an island bounded by highways on all its sides. Cheryl Richards, who was hit and killed, was a healthcare worker and a person of color. She was killed during a shopping trip to Assembly Row. Marshall Mack was a Vietnam vet, a prisoner of war, and a person of color, and he was killed when getting groceries. Please prioritize the traffic safety improvements to 2838 before more of our community members are killed. East Somerville is the poorest community in Somerville, the most diverse community in Somerville, and it's the most ignored community when it comes to public resources. We are tired, we are heartbroken of being last on the list. Prioritize us. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go next to Wigzam Moore here. Asking to unmute now.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for letting me comment. And first, I want to thank the public officials for really listening and working with the community over the last 10 to 20 years. It's really appreciated that we're in sync on so many of these issues. I want to talk about both air pollution and noise, and not quite as much about accidents, which I think other people are doing a terrific job of, both tonight and recently. The first thing I want to reference is that for quite a while, there have been authoritative studies coming out of Europe and Canada that involved the whole populations of large cities and that looked at health effects of pollution very close to highways and very busy roads. In other words, not regional PM 2.5, which is what most of the focus is on in the US. And I would just say in these well-executed studies, I'll just give you 3 examples. Both Oslo and Stockholm did whole city studies of lung cancer mortality. And these are high quality epidemiology. They completely take out smoking and occupational variables from these. And what they found was that in Oslo it was higher, but in Stockholm, which I use because I think it's a better study and considered more different factors, Friedrich Nyberg found that there was a 60% higher lung cancer mortality for those in the top 10% of mobile pollution in Stockholm. All other things being equal, a 60% higher lung cancer mortality. And lung cancer is the second largest category of death from transportation and other air pollution. Perhaps more importantly, well, let me move to California next, because Nyberg was in 2000 and 2005. The Californians have done the best studies in the United States on childhood asthma and mobile pollution. And they are considered authoritative by US EPA and National Institute of Health. And what they have found through a series of meticulous studies in California is that childhood asthma is roughly 100% higher for children who are closest to the freeways in California. And these are very rigorous studies that follow the children until they graduate from high school. Even if they move out of state, they follow the children. Lastly, the most important study of these three whole city studies, Michael Brower, who's a leading global epidemiologist and a principal of the Gates Fund and Global Burden of Disease Studies, did a whole city study of the adult population of Vancouver, and had a great postdoc named Gan working with him. And they found that the population who lived closest to the highways in Vancouver had 55% higher cardiovascular mortality. Now, keep in mind, cardiovascular is 40% of all deaths in advanced economies. So that is by far the number one killer of people from transportation-related air pollution. I'd like to shift over and just mention that, as folks here know, Ellen Reisner and I and others who have other grassroots activists in STEP and Mystic View Task Force asked Tufts University and the other research universities to do a series of formal environmental epidemiology studies in Somerville, in Boston, in Roxbury, Chinatown, in Malden, in Chelsea, in South Boston, and in Dorchester, looking at cardiovascular biomarkers of inflammation and ultrafine particles from highways. And we found, importantly in Somerville for tonight's conversation, a statistically significant relationship between the two most used biomarkers of cardiovascular inflammation and the traffic pollution from the I-93 Route 28 corridor. And we found that in population within 100 meters and in population within 400 meters, as compared with population living more than a kilometer away in all of those communities that I've mentioned, but most specifically in Somerville. And now I'd like to just make a couple, and I would just say, somebody asked me the other night, well, how many deaths do you think there have been here that would not have occurred at those times since I-93 opened? My estimate would be 5,000 to 10,000 premature deaths directly due to that highway corridor. Let me switch just briefly to noise. We have recently done a lot of noise monitoring in the I-93 and Mystic Avenue corridors in Somerville. Two different studies, one done by a mid-career environmental engineer who's done some very advanced work for his doctorate, including making instruments. And what we found specifically along the I-93 Route 38 corridor in Somerville was that the noise averaged as high as 75 decibels. This is without a penalty for nighttime. You know, aviation noise, they always add 10 decibels at night and call it DNL. But this is just straight averaging. And the noise is highest at the third levels of the triple deckers. And the reason for that is their line of sight to more lanes of traffic, and therefore they're also line of hearing to more lanes of traffic. But that is enough noise to cause not just noise annoyance, but to cause serious cardiovascular outcomes, not as much as the ultrafine particles from the air pollution, but still quite serious at that level of noise, and about 100 times as much road noise as anybody gets jet noise in Somerville, but of course highly restricted to the people who live in that corridor and happen to be more environmental justice in origin. And I would just also mention in connection with that, because this is a tricky topic, there is going to be a proposal made to bring about 48% of all of the jets that take off on runway 33 left, which is the runway which affects the greatest population of all the Logan runways and the greatest number of environmental justice population members. but there's a proposal to bring 48% of that jet traffic closer in Somerville so that it would be over this corridor we're speaking about tonight in Somerville and quite close to Mystic Housing and other populations of interest. So thank you so much for letting me speak and having this meeting tonight.
All right, thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Stacy Rubin here.
Excellent. Good evening. This is Stacy Rubin, and I'm the Vice President for Environmental Justice with Conservation Law Foundation, or CLF. The capital investment plan requires improvements to reflect recent legal and policy requirements. Governor Baker and our legislature enacted the new roadmap law in March of this year, which requires all secretariats, including MassDOT, to integrate environmental justice, climate mitigation, and resiliency into state planning documents. The current draft CIP does not reflect those climate and environmental justice requirements fully. I recommend inclusion of funds into the plan for several important projects that will help us make progress toward our climate targets and environmental justice obligations. First, regarding the Fairmount line, it is critical to include funds in the next fiscal year to cover the cost for the MBTA to complete the design and engineering for electrification on the Fairmount line during fiscal year 2022. This will also help the T qualify for federal funding to implement the regional rail recommendations authorized by the Fiscal and Management Control Board. Further, this CIP should require that MassDOT begin construction to support rail electrification by November 1st of 2022. I'm a proud member of the Fairmount Indigo Transit Coalition, and we want to see an MBTA commitment to full electrification of the Fairmount line from South Station through Reedville by 2024. Next, I want to turn to I-93 and echo the wonderful comments of many people and leaders from Somerville. I recommend that the CIP include $2 million to cover the cost of installing sound barriers along I-93 in the States Avenue neighborhood of Somerville. This is a 3/4 mile stretch of road, approximately where residents of color and low-income households live in close proximity to the highway and have historically and currently borne the burden of loud and harmful noises, as well as the air pollution you heard about from others testifying tonight. We seek $2 million to fund the installation of dense tree cover in the area of I-93 adjacent to Mystic Avenue, as well as improvements at their Route 28 and Route 38 intersection to improve safety and pedestrian access. We further recommend that MassDOT provide support to the Department of Housing and Community Development to install triple glazed windows as sound mitigation at state-funded public housing on Mystic Avenue. Regarding the Green Line extension, CLF requests inclusion of $5 million in the CIP to cover the cost of the environmental review process of the Green Line extension phase 2 through Route 16. As phase 1 of the Green Line extension is nearing completion, we need to evaluate the opportunity for extension through phase 2. I also want to elevate the need for greater attention and resources for the red-blue connector. While the CIP includes the red-blue connector in the amount of $3.6 million for fiscal year 2022, and then $15 million in total for a few years after that, we're going to need additional funding to realize the long-awaited and critical project. We recommend additional funding totaling $35 million over a 5-year timeframe and commitment to build the red-blue connector and have it operating well before 2030. CLF supports inclusion in the draft CIP of the Blue Line Harbor Tunnel infrastructure improvements and the $1.1 million for a climate change resilience vulnerability assessment in fiscal year 22. We recommend additional funds to be integrated into the remainder of the CIP so that we can implement the findings of the vulnerability assessment in fiscal year 2023. And finally, I recommend inclusion in the CIP of a greater commitment to procuring battery electric buses and bus maintenance facility upgrades to ensure that we make significant progress toward electrifying our public transit and bus systems. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment.
All right, thank you. I am going to go next to Chris Dewan, asking him to unmute now.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm Chris Dwan. I'm a resident of Somerville in Ward 2, adjacent to the recently completed long and contentious Beacon Street project. Within Somerville, I am the co-chair of the Urban Forestry Committee. I served on our Vision Zero working group, and I'm one of the organizers of SAS. And I want to echo what seemingly everybody else from Somerville has said this evening. I appreciate very much MassDOT's commitment to the entire state. It's a huge job you have to do. Thank you for hearing us. And I will echo everybody else that on the intersection of Mystic and McGrath, on the I-93 corridor through Somerville, we are asking for the already funded $2 million for sound and particulate barriers to be installed post haste. As Wigzammer said, we estimate 5,000 to 10,000 premature deaths already due to the long, slow violence of pollution. And also I would ask that the life-saving pedestrian and ground level improvements be prioritized. We have a spot in our city that is literally killing the residents on the ground as they try to get groceries, and it's completely unacceptable that when you go there, you see that there are no curb cuts to provide ADA accessibility for folks in wheelchairs or with assistive devices. I will echo what folks have said, the $2 million to install dense tree cover along the Mystic corridor is similarly critical, both to abate noise, to absorb the microfine particulates, and also to have MassDOT doing their part for sequestering carbon in the time of climate change. Finally, I would ask for support for our Department of Housing and Community Development to install triple glazed windows in the neighborhoods most directly impacted by highway work, particularly the neighborhoods of East Somerville, most directly impacted by I-93. Thank you so much for hearing me.
All right, thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Ellen Reisner.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I don't want to spend a lot of time reiterating the comments made by other people. I am from East Somerville. I've lived here for 21 years. And for the past 15 years, I've worked with Wigzammer and faculty at Tufts and other universities in the area, studying the ultrafine particulates and near roadway pollution, both noise and air pollution. And I feel very, very strongly that we have to do something to help the people living in these neighborhoods, because this was a wrong that was perpetrated on the community in the 1970s with no help to them to put up sound barriers that would have helped reduce their exposure. And like many environmental justice communities around the country, it is time for the state to pay attention to what we need to do in Somerville and in other communities across the state where highways were built in low-income neighborhoods and put all of the residents at risk. So I strongly want to support all the recommendations for investments that have been made. I also want to support that Mass DOT take an active role in encouraging the Department of Housing and Community Development to support the installation of triple glazed windows at the state-funded part of Mystic Housing. The federal part has already got triple glazed windows, but the people living in the other section do not, and they need the funding to have that done. I also want to mention that it's very important to put funding into the CIP for the environmental impact review for the extension to Route 16. There isn't an EJ neighborhood in West Medford and West Somerville that would benefit from getting this service. And they were, when the money got reallocated to phase 1 of the Green Line, it was not reestablished to put money back for this environmental impact review. And I think it is really important to do that. And I really want to just thank everybody who's made all these comments to get the attention that this is really important. And I know in a previous conversation that I was in a meeting with Secretary Pollock last year, and we asked for the sound barriers for mitigation for the HOV lane removal on I-93. And she said, well, we can't do it for that. But if a large project comes up, then that's a possibility. And we want type 2 sound barriers installed along the States Avenue in Somerville. Thank you very much for being able to comment.
Okay, thank you for your comment. I'm going to go next to Rhonda Corey.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I'm a resident of the 10 Hills neighborhood, which is adjacent to Mystic Ave and 28 looking over toward Assembly. The only kind of particulars I'd like to add to the comment session, where the Christmas tree shop is, I guess I will call it, at Assembly, there used to be a barrier of trees between the 10 Hills neighborhood along the grassy area on McGrath Highway. And 2-ish years ago, all of the trees were taken down. When I asked the city for that, for the reasoning for that, it was a state maintenance program to pretty much clear cut that sound barrier. So there's been no efforts that I can see to replace that. I'd like to add that to the recorded comments. So not only do we need more sound and particulate barriers in the neighborhoods that we're discussing tonight, maybe stop removing ones that already exist. Thank you for the time.
All right, thank you. Are there any more questions and comments? As a reminder, you can use the raise hand function and we will get to you. All right, seeing none, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here tonight. As a reminder, the comment period is open till June 14th, and you can submit comments online through our online comment tool. You can submit them via email to an email to masscip@mass.gov or state.ma.us, and all of this information is on the mass.gov/CIP website. Thank you again. And I will talk, and thank you so much again for joining us tonight. Thanks.
Thank you all.